Mhm. Okay, it is recording. All right, so with that, let us go with the board. Thanks for updating the issues ahead of the meeting. I see a few issues have moved since I looked at the board earlier today. So maybe we can just quickly go through stuff that's currently in review. Maybe we'll start with 1678, Ludo.
Yes, so this pull request is in review. I've been addressing the different feedbacks from Aaron and Jude. So yeah, waiting on a new pass.
I see, so you're just waiting on new round of feedback?
Yeah.
Okay. And then 1669, I remember we decided that we're just going to close the corresponding PR. And should we do the same for this issue as well, that it should be subsumed by integer subtyping?
No, so I think that this issue ultimately is like still open. Like we should close it once we implement integer subtyping, because that'll solve this problem. Yeah.
Got it. So in that case, I'm gonna at least move it to the backlog and remove it from the current milestone, because we don't have like a specific timeline for it just yet, right?
Yeah.
All right, and then Aaron, your PR, does that directly address this issue, 1703?
Yes.
Okay.
So it provides like a slightly better error message. Like it's not a structured error, really. It's just like a message that, you know, failed to parse the contract name.
Got it. And I think both Ludo and Jude approved this PR, so it seems like we just
okay.
and
So
close it up.
that can be merged, yeah.
All right. Cool. Jude, you want to give an update on 1677?
Yeah, it's in progress. I hope to be done sometime between tomorrow or Wednesday with it. I think overall this PR is probably going to be less invasive than the sortition DB, because most of it so far has just been restructuring the databases so that they are keyed off of a sortition ID in a block hash as opposed to a burn header hash in a block hash. I think maybe the only other thing that might change here is the way in which we store blocks. I think there might need to be a little bit of refactoring there based on the document, the design document. But other than that, it's like 30% done or so right now.
Okay. Ludo, 1727?
Yeah, so I started looking at this issue this morning. So yeah, it's a bit hard at this point to provide an ETA, I guess, by the end of the week. So yeah, maybe I might have a question for the team on this one. So I think that Aaron suggested to look at the multi-file, like the ability to attach multiple database on one request. And I saw that, so on the link provided, like if you look at the section 9, yeah, like the section things that can go wrong. So I don't know if these bullet points should be considered as a no-go, or yeah, would love to get some input on this.
Yeah, so I think that what we should do for now is in this PR, in the POX database, we should probably just put it in the same database as the sortitions DB, and keep an open issue for making sure that we are transactional across our databases, because like it would ultimately require a refactor of other databases unrelated to this PR.
Sounds good.
I mean, it sounds like we already have this issue, like it's not related to this PR specifically, right? If you're using more than one database, we are open to this kind of failure mode.
Correct, yeah.
How do we currently provide transactionality across distinct SQLite databases? Do we have anything at all?
So in the cases where any transaction fails, any transaction commitment fails, we panic.
Okay.
Believe in all of the databases, which I mean is not perfect. Like it doesn't give you like a recoverable state, but
And
it,
better
it
to be
prevents
crash
you.
safe than
Yes,
incorrect. So
right. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't allow you to continue processing incorrectly.
Okay.
So that's kind of
yeah,
it.
that's good to know. All right. So looks like you have a path forward, Ludo. Okay, what about all of the stuff in the backlog? Is there anything in here that is in progress, or everything here is still in backlog? In which case, we should just move them to the next milestone.
I think 1713 is in progress / in review.
Oh, this is the same.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure why I'm tagged on it. Oh, I think I'm tagged on it because I was assigned to give Pascal some comments.
I see. I mean, it almost feels like Pascal has a PR, and then,
Yes.
and would that address some of this?
Yeah, so this PR, my understanding of this PR is that it's trying to eliminate basically some spurious error logs or warning logs. And that Jude is like currently going back and forth a little bit with Pascal on changes in here. And Pascal's making changes and being fairly responsive. So I'd say this is probably close to in progress. And
should just make Pascal the assignee instead of you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and I will move it under. Okay.
Backlogged, all of them.
All right.
We might as well just take them all out of the sprint. Like we're going to be working on POX for the next week and a half.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it for the sprint. Let's just quickly see. So most of these were just moved in from the previous sprint. Jude, you had filed these two, and I think we had marked them for the sprint last week, maybe. Do we feel like these are still sort of important and urgent enough to be worked on in the sprint, or the POX work will take precedence?
Yes and no. We really do need to be testing microblock stream handling as soon as possible, but I don't yet know where that's going to fall into the schedule compared to our work on POX.
What is our best kind of path? So let's say we were not doing the POX work. What is the best path forward to get testing of like microblocks onto the testnet?
I think we need to do two things. We need to start mining unanchored microblocks. So once a node mines a anchored stacks block, it will then need to proceed to produce microblocks until the next until the next miner gets selected. And then we need to make sure that that miner in turn confirms as many of those microblocks as possible. So we need to ensure that the microblocks get properly propagated to all the nodes listening on the network.
So this would be like work that we do in our sort of, I think right now it's still called Neon node in the code base, right? That's where all of this would have to happen.
For the time being, that's the first thing. And the second thing we should be doing is trying to break it. So trying to build malicious miners that fork the stream and make sure that other nodes can A, detect that there are forked streams, and B, try to mine a poison microblock transaction in order to steal the malicious miner's coin base.
Okay. Can we at least file issues for these two things? You know, if and when we get to the first issue, which is like implementing this functionality as part of the Neon node, then the second part, you know, we may try and get help from the community, like put out some bug bounties to get like other people to build these malicious miners. Like we may.
Before you go thinking that this is going to be part of the Neon node, this really needs to be part of a separate miner program. Like
no, I understand, and that's. But right now, the way we are testing out mining is through Neon node, right?
So this is again a question. This is, I think, again, kind of a design question. Do we want to keep building a some minor software into the Neon node and risk getting it coupled in to the node software, or do we want to just bite the bullet now and separate it out? Because at the end of the day, they're not going. It's not going to be inside the node.
I think for now, like, we should continue just having a naive miner built into the node, because yeah, there's a lot in the pipeline, and yeah, I don't think we should be trying to pull out and then refactor and redesign a miner interface while also trying to test the microblock stuff. So I think, like, if we can get the Neon node to broadcast microblocks easily enough, then we should do that. But like, if it seems like it's going to be like a huge volume of work, like if it's going to be like 2,000 lines of code added to the Stacks node, then I think we should probably reevaluate.
Okay, we can go ahead and do it in the Neon node then.
Ludo, did you have any thoughts on this?
I guess also in favor of expediting the testing if we can. And yeah, at some point, just take the time to re-architecture the miner software, I guess.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like everyone's more or less in alignment that, you know, for now we can continue, assuming that the amount of changes required are reasonably modest. Continue shipping a naive miner with the Stacks node, and then we revisit this at a later date. And in, you know, the end state pre-mainnet is that we want there to be a completely separate miner implementation, you know, presumably by other parties, not maintained by PVC and not part of the core Stacks node code base, right?
I mean, I don't think there's anything legally wrong with the foundation building a miner.
Sure. Yeah. All right, so Jude, can you file the 2 issues that you mentioned for bringing microblocks onto the testnet? And that way, at least we can track and slot in that work as we are, you know, packing up the next sprint.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, and so these 2 are things that would need to happen before we can bring microblocks onto the testnet?
Yes and no. You could do that right now. We just wouldn't know what to do really if there's ever a fork in the microblock stream.
Okay. So that would be like a known issue with the Stacks node software at that point if we launch it without addressing this.
Well, that last issue, I think 1707 probably would have to be implemented.
Okay.
Otherwise, we, yeah, there could be some pretty serious problems in the chain state.
Okay. I mean, my read is that we probably will not get to these in this coming sprint in the next 2 weeks.
Probably not.
Okay. All right. So before we come to the rest of the items in the sprint, maybe we can just quickly go through, review the timeline here. That might help us make sure that what's in the sprint actually reflects how we're thinking of spending our time. Okay, there we go. So, whoa. Sorry, my computer is really slow today, I don't know why. All right, so let's just coming back to some of the items here. Can I mark this as done?
Yeah.
Okay. And then same here, Ludo.
Yes, and it's still in review, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is where we are right now. Aaron, does this block need to be adjusted, or you think this is still more or less accurate?
Yeah. So I think Ludo took on this work. So the
Okay.
POX database basically is the track POX anchor blocks.
I see.
Those are one and the same.
Okay.
So that's one adjustment. Anchor block.
This here. Well, okay. And then there was some comment about like this anchor block detection is just outdated or needs to be reworded.
Yeah, I think like anchor block detection, I'm not sure ultimately what that is going to mean. Like it's going to depend a little bit on like, I guess like how much of track POX anchor blocks, like that POX database, it depends on how much that does, like whether or not that is generating maybe a couple more to-dos. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So what's on your plate, Aaron, with respect to POX right now?
Yeah, exactly. So the problem here is like integration testing of the anchorless implementation is really, to a certain extent, blocked on tracking the POX anchor blocks and the block database identification. I mean, I think that tracking the POX DB could probably be stubbed, and we could begin work by good work with the integration testing of that working. But it's still blocked on the block DB identification. Well, actually, let me think that through. So really what's going on here is like this integration testing of anchorless implementation. I just opened a new issue for it. What's really happening is like the chains controller or chains coordinator PR, it implements a main loop, but it is not integrated with the rest of the nodes, the node code. Doing that is kind of non-trivial. So that's kind of like the next step. And I can take that work on and start working on it. And I don't think that there would be like significant blockers from either the block DB identification or the POX DB work. So that's probably what is going to be on my plate this week.
Okay. So you said there's already an open issue for that?
Yeah, I just opened an issue.
Okay.
So I will sign myself and throw it in this milestone.
Yeah, so if you can just add a block in here. Yeah, add it to the next milestone and also put in a block in here.
Yep.
And same thing for everyone else. My sense is that, a bunch of this is probably shifting to the right. So as best as we can, let's just try to keep it updated so we have a good view of kind of where we're tracking. What about the stacking wire format? I mean, if that's not too much work, it seems like that's somewhat of an independent task that we can just sort of, it's like a specification task that we can get out of the way without necessarily impacting anything else.
Yeah, I think that that's true. So I think maybe the right thing to do is I'll work on the integration stuff, and if it turns out that it's either blocked or I make a ton of headway on it, then I can start working on the stacking wire format. I think that the reason that I want to make sure that we're doing the integration stuff now is because I think that that's sort of the biggest pile of unknown unknowns.
Oh, 100% agree. Yeah. Just trying to figure out if you're blocked on that work getting started, then there are other things that you can make progress on.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Jude, I'm guessing we should probably shift some of these as well, right?
I already shifted them.
Okay. All right, so Aaron's going to add in another block in here for the work that he's taking on and potentially move this one down here. And then Ludo, I mean, we're already on Monday and again, based on what you were saying, my sense is this will probably take longer, so we should move it around a little bit.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you were saying maybe end of the week, and then once you have a better estimate, just feel free to update it directly here.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay, so in that case, let's come back to the sprint here. And okay, it's already showing the newest. So this is the one that Aaron just added, I guess. Let's add this to the backlog. Terry, you filed this one. I don't think this is actionable for this sprint, but besides sort of a triaging step right now, like overall, have people looked at this? Do we have any thoughts on the proposal? We can also, I don't think it's super urgent. Well, I think there are like other clarity discussions happening. So I'm happy to consolidate all of this as a separate discussion, more focused on clarity, whatever works for people. If there are opinions around this right now, we can hear them out at least.
Yeah, I think that this is related to a feature that we have requested, like this, like updating fields of a tuple without.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would like to support this. Ultimately, it's well typed and all that kind of stuff. So.
Okay. All right. Is this something that how sort of self-contained is this? Like if Terry was to put together a PR, do we think that would be pretty disruptive to the stuff that we're doing right now?
No, so I think that this would be like just implementing a merge function, I think would be fairly well contained. Like, yeah, might not be the most well contained of any native function, but I think in the scale of native functions, it's pretty self-contained. Like, it doesn't have like strange typing or anything like that.
I'm going to add this help wanted label just to indicate that these are things that where we will welcome PRs if people want to make progress on them. Okay, I think this is the refactoring discussion that happened on Discord and other places. Seems like everyone's sort of on board with pursuing some sort of renaming of these structs to clarify things after the POX implementation is done. Is that right? All right. Has anyone had a look at this? I think Jude, you made one comment.
It's probably due to clock skew that happened. He just got unlucky. I didn't see his last comment though.
He's basically saying that it's unlikely to have a 2 seconds drift on his system. So besides clock skew, like there's, I guess like what I'm trying to ask is like, is it possible at all that there is a bug here, that like an actual bug, not just clock skew?
What's happening is he's reading the time in milliseconds and then reading it again, and the second time it's smaller than the first time. I don't know how it could be anything but clock skew.
When you say he's reading it, you mean like the node that's, yeah, okay. Okay, so should we just close it out then? Is there anything else in terms of information we need or how to validate this?
Well, generally speaking, I think there's an issue here, which is don't do Bayer subtractions unless you know the clock is monotonic.
All right, I'm going to close this out unless there is an objection here.
Well, yeah, we just need to change the issue.
Yeah. You mean the title of the issue?
Yeah, I think the issue here fundamentally is there's a Bayer subtraction that's happening that could in some cases lead to a panic. Like this problem wouldn't exist, clock skew or no, if we had simply done a checked subtraction and then just ate the resulting error.
But in that case, like what is the reasonable behavior for the miner in this situation?
It's not the minor per se. It's the fact that we check the timestamp before and after doing something, and it's possible for the second value to be smaller than the first value.
No, I get that. I'm saying let's say we do a check subtraction instead, but like if the fact is that a clock skew has happened, is there what should the minor behavior be? Assuming like, let's say we did a check subtraction, like can the minor just keep making progress as if nothing has happened?
Yeah, it should just eat the error. It should just say like it's 0. Or it should like a saturating subtraction. And we should probably comb through the code base and find all cases of this sort of thing happening, because it's definitely not limited to just this one line.
Yeah.
Nor is it just the minor that does it. So it's still mislabeled here. It's not just limited to the minor.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I think that the thing that I would just want to like confirm is that there's like no possibility that the variable is being set in like one thread and subtracted in a different thread. Because like if there's a threading issue, like that's.
No, I checked the place in the code. All it's doing is it's reading it's not seconds, by the way, it's milliseconds.
Oh.
So I think his message here is a little bit off.
This one?
Yeah, let me double check that. I believe it's in burn chain.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other lesson here is like their process time is a clock that is like not affected by clock updates, right? Like
so
if we're going to use timing functions in our code, we should be using process time rather than
wall clock. Yeah.
Wall clock.
For doing time deltas, I agree.
For doing time deltas. So, I mean, we could just like raise an issue or rename this issue to address that. Like just stop reading wall clock time, or like look at all the instances of wall clock time and figure out if we ever try to subtract.
Yeah, that's really what this issue needs to be doing here. Yeah. Advocating for using process time. Yep, it's clock drift of 2 milliseconds that caused this. Dewalker, do you also just want to let him know quickly that it's the clock skew here is measured in milliseconds, not seconds? Thanks.
All right. So any objections to marking this also as a help wanted issue? Seems like, these are good changes, should be relatively straightforward to make as well. Modular testing.
It's pretty easy to do. Just grep the code base for it.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Yeah, I think if we're going to mark this help wanted, we should also rename the issue.
Yep.
Yeah, I can do that afterwards. Okay, the 1728 is, I guess, just related to 1733. So unless there's more to add there, I can skip over it. Okay, Friedger filed this issue. I tried to looked through, this was last week, so now I guess like the logs are probably gone. But yeah, he had this transaction that was showing pending for 20 hours. I tried to look in the logs for that transaction ID and I could locate a single log entry for that transaction. So I don't know if there's anything meaningful in terms of our ability to debug this at this point. But going forward, like if these kind of issues happen, how do we go about debugging them? You know, whether it's me or someone else on the team who has, let's say, access to Kibana, and if people are running their own local nodes, we can ask them to look through logs. But besides looking through logs, what else can we do to help debug this type of situation?
Yeah, so I think that this is like pretty similar to something that the DevX team had described as like ghost transactions or something, where it might be caused by like a different transaction with the same nonce having been broadcasted at some point, and this transaction becoming like sort of permanently either replaced or I don't know, something. In terms of like debugging this, the sidecar, every transaction that it receives now, it stores the raw transaction hex. So from the sidecar, we should be able to get more data about this transaction, like what it looks like. And then at that point, we could probably diagnose by like looking at this account and see if the nonce has since incremented past this amount. But basically, I think to debug these kinds of things, like we need to start poking around in our databases to like find the actual raw transaction.
Okay. All right, I can check if, and then would your nonce fixes PR have impacted this at all? And because I don't think this was deployed on Argonne when this issue happened.
Yes, so that like nonce fixes PR is like sort of directly addressing this like corner case where a transaction with the same nonce but in at a different, broadcasted at a different height would always replace. So yeah, it would have impacted this.
All right. Can you just add a comment to this issue that, you know, that PR should help and will be deployed or is currently deployed? So we'll keep an eye out. Otherwise, not much to do here. Okay, 1719.
Yeah, I mean, this is a nice feature to have, but I don't think it's like terribly high priority.
Okay, anyone disagree? Okay.
Can wait till after mainnet if we had to.
Yeah, like this is like non-consensus bearing, non-mempool stability critical, so.
Oh, Jude, do you think this could be another sort of help wanted type issue?
Yeah, probably. Byte order is an obsolete package in the Rust ecosystem. It uses like way too much unsafe code, and even by the author's own admission, the current Rust standard library does everything that byte order was created to do in the first place. So we can easily phase it out. It's just a matter of sitting down and doing it. And
it's only being used in the Bitcoin crate?
Yeah, I think it's used also in the base 58 check addresses, but in all cases, we just have one use case for it, and that's just for reading and writing byte streams as little endian.
Okay.
So imminently fixable using the intrinsics in primitive Rust types these days.
And so while we're doing that, like, is this PR still blocked? Did this person, I think we had asked for exact build failure, but I don't think this person responded. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. And I think, Jude, you were saying that even if there was like a legitimate build failure here, once that person responds, that we want to inspect what's in this upgrade before actually going through with it?
Yeah, I took a look. It's a pretty scary crate, and I'd be fine. That's actually what inspired me to just try to get byte order removed completely.
Yeah. Okay.
So should we close this PR in favor
Yeah.
of?
Yeah. Like, unless you can tell us what's going wrong here, like, I don't know. It's more important that we just get rid of byte order altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just say that. Okay, if I don't hear back in a day or two, I'll just close this PR out.
Yeah, I mean, I also suspect like issue 1717, like removing byte order. I suspect that that's like an under 20-minute task.
Yeah, probably.
And we have like good test coverage of every use case of it. So like after this meeting, we might just do it just for like, because it's like nicer just to be able to like close that PR.
Yeah, I agree.
Having these like long open PRs is not good.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. All right, well, if someone has 20 minutes to spare, feel free to take a crack. Okay, I think everything else we've covered in previous issues or previous sprint meetings. Okay, so talked about this. Jude is going to file these issues. Anything else people want to talk about?
I had a quick question for Aaron.
Yep.
Do you, in the design of POX, can you maybe elaborate more about where you see the sortition ID struct going? Like, is it deterministic and going to be the same for all nodes, or is it going to be something that's block arrival dependent? Or I'm just trying to figure out what kind of things I can assume about it in getting the chain state ready.
Yeah, so I would say my original thinking around the sortition ID is that it would be node dependent, so like would not be universal across nodes.
Okay.
If that turns out to be prohibitive, which it might be for maybe the block downloader, then we can come up with alternatives. But yeah, I would say assume the sortition ID is not universal across nodes.
I'm sorry, it's not what?
It's not universal across nodes.
Okay. I do need some stable identifier for the particular set of operations that got processed for a block under, you know, the history of POX. Do you foresee there being a identifier to use in that case, like maybe the consensus hash?
Yeah, maybe the consensus hash. I mean, what's that identifier being used for?
The downloader.
Okay, yeah, I think probably the consensus hash, or we could reconstruct like the POX identifier, like the giant bit vector, from the POX DB. Like those are the sort of two options in my mind. I think that the consensus hash is probably viable. I need to think a little bit more about whether or not the consensus hash is actually provides a unique.
Sorry, go ahead.
I guess actually consensus hash plus the stacks block would be unique.
Yeah, because like the refactoring work thus far has been just trying to figure out, and I just discovered I was doing it wrong, figuring out what we're going to replace the burn header hash with when calculating the primary key for each stacks block inside the forkable database, like the header database, for example.
Yeah, I mean, for the databases, like the sortition ID should be sufficient, like the sortition ID plus the stacks block header. But like when it comes to communicating that with other nodes, it's probably not sufficient. So
right, that's the problem, because the state root in each block is derived from the stacks header DB and the clarity VM DB.
see.
So it has to be stable across all nodes, whatever we use there.
Gotcha. I mean, in that case, yeah, I think we could figure out a way to make it so that the POX identifier is actually stable across all nodes. Like that seems eminently doable, if that makes things easier. Because I do actually worry a little bit about the consensus hash, because it might be the case that, like, let's say you have a bunch of commitments that are burns that are like sent to the 0 address. And there's one POX fork in which no anchor block was chosen. So all those transactions are valid, right?
Yep.
And then you have another POX fork in which, again, no anchor block was chosen, but like it's a different fork, like some prior anchor block that was like previously not there has since appeared. And so that consensus hash would still be the same for that individual block, but it should actually be evaluated against a different history.
I'm not quite seeing how it's the same. Maybe it's because, I don't know, I thought the consensus hash was derived from the subset of block stack operations that were accepted under the current POX reward cycle. So
yes. So the consensus hash for that block would be the same, because in both cases, I guess this might be easier to explain with like a diagram. But like it's basically the case that a given block might have the same block commits evaluated in 2 different POX forks.
okay, yeah, I see that now. Yeah, because they could both be burning.
Right.
But the consensus hash is more than just, it's derived from more than just the current blocks operations. It's also from the previous geometric series of consensus hashes.
I see.
So it should be unique.
Yeah,
it should
yeah.
be different in those cases, even if the inputs are the same.
Yeah, that's true. And like we can like become fully confident of this by like requiring the consensus hash also include the like anchor block presence status at every 1,000 blocks.
That won't work. The consensus hash is used for identifying. It's used on chain. It's used to ensure that Bitcoin transactions. Sorry, let me back up for a sec. The consensus hash needs to be independent of arrival order, because it's used to determine whether or not a Stacks node or a Stacks client that produced the Bitcoin transaction is using a node that follows the same rule set. Which
yes.
I think would be the case, because like what POX really is doing is that you're creating multiple virtual burn chains, where each virtual burn chain is dependent on the particular sets of anchor blocks that have arrived and the sets of Bitcoin transactions that will be considered valid as a result.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm suggesting is like making it, rather than it be implicitly dependent on your view of the anchor block history, what the consensus hash is that you're like broadcasting with your block commits. Making it explicit every 1,000 blocks, you have to like explicitly include what your POX view is.
Yeah, so either way, then we're going to need to derive some sort of identifier from the POX view, regardless of whether or not
that's true.
Identify. Yeah.
Right. Either way, it would need to be. We would need to have some sort of identifier.
So would that be the POX ID then? Would that be stable across all nodes?
I don't think that like, I think that we should assume that that's not the POX ID, but it's like something that we can get from the POX ID and the POX database, right? Like you could imagine that we're like not passing this giant bit vector around from all over the place, but like we can get that bit vector very easily from the POX ID and the POX database.
Sure. I don't even need the bit vector per se, like just the hash of it should probably be fine.
Yes, yeah.
But either way though, like I need to be able to pair each stacks block with some identifier that is dependent on which POX fork we're in. And I need that identifier to be stable across all nodes that have the same sets of blocks, no matter what order they arrive in.
Yeah, so I think that what we should do for the stacks blocks is use the consensus hash. So it would be like consensus hash plus the stacks block header hash. And then separately, we'll come up with a way to like convince ourselves that the consensus hash can be used this way.
I actually think you just convinced me earlier that it cannot.
It can if we include some sort of identifier every 1,000 blocks. Right?
I don't know. This maybe I have to think about that.
Okay.
I'm not convinced either way yet.
Yeah, the basically the worry that I have with the POX identifier needing to be universal across all nodes is that I worry that these, I just worry about having to come up with like a different POX identifier for every single block. Like I want it to be the case that like in the good state, like in the normal path, like there is a single POX identifier. Like we have a POX identifier of 0, which indicates that like you are not seeing any missing anchor blocks. So yeah, maybe what we do is we say the POX ID of 0 is a special POX ID, and all other POX IDs are like a hash of the bit vector.
I don't know. This is that kind of scares me, just because it feels like now we have to write two code paths, one for the case where POX ID is 0 and one for the case where it's not. I'm just trying to think, is there a way we can, I don't know, this seems solvable. Like it seems like we could figure out a way to produce an identifier for a POX fork independent of the block arrivals. I'm sorry, when I say POX identifier, I mean like the thing I'm replacing the burn header hash with.
Oh, I see.
Because that is stable, like everywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
And assume, and you could, presumably, you could have like a POX type identifier. Like what if you just had like the hash of the bit vector of the presence or absence of anchor blocks? Maybe that would be enough, or.
Yeah. I think that's actually true. Like this should be eminently solvable.
It doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, it doesn't exist yet. But like what we could do is we can assume, like let's assume that our POX identifiers are actually just universal across all nodes. And yeah, we could build that. I think the POX database should be perfectly capable of generating these opaque hashes that are guaranteed to be the same for every node.
Yeah, regardless of arrival order.
Yeah.
Okay, I will add a stub method for that then.
Cool.
All right. Anything else? We're almost up in time here.